Good evening, Dr. Angela Mulroney here, and I have an amazing guest, Natalia Porras, who is in Montreal right now, joining me for this broadcast on what we need to be thinking about now in marketing for dentists. So very happy to have you here with me tonight.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm also happy to be with you and ready to get into all the questions that we're going to be covering tonight.
Right. So do you want to give a little bit of your background on your history in marketing?
Sure. So I was introduced to the dental world back in many years ago. I used to work at the Faculty of Dentistry at McGill University, and that was my first sort of introduction to the dental world. That's when I figured out that just marketing for dental practices were very much at an infancy stage. I moved on from the Faculty of Dentistry at McGill, and then I completed my MBA, and I launched or leaped myself into entrepreneurship, and I started my firm, which is a marketing agency. And one of my first clients was an oral and maxillofacial surgeon who called me, who needed help for their marketing. And so that's how NP Dental Marketing was founded, and that's how it started. And in little time, we had more clients, and they were all in the dental industry. And since then, we've been working with general dental practices as well as specialists and some national organizations as well.
Nice. And my background is I used to be a dentist, so I understand the dental world very, very well. I came into marketing by accident by trying to get my business coaching company for dentists launched. I used social media quite a bit to get myself noticed, and then people started to go, "You came out of nowhere. Can you start doing this for me to get me noticed the way that you did for yourself?" So I became an accidental marketer, and my company has grown exponentially since we officially launched it. And yeah, we both work on interesting sides of the marketing world with dentists, because we know it's sometimes a challenging endeavor, isn't it?
It is. It can be very challenging. And I think the reason for that, and correct me if I'm wrong, Angela, it's because dentists don't necessarily know marketing as much. They haven't received the training, let's say business training and marketing training. And so sometimes it could be challenging just to educate, I think, clients as to what marketing should be, or should be, let's say, following best practices.
Absolutely. And it's part of the culture of what dentistry used to be compared to what it is now. Like before, you used to be able to hang up your shingle and ta-da, you were going to do quite well in the industry. And now you have to you're competing against a lot of people. Like you step on any big city, you step onto a street corner and you can see like 6 practices on that corner. And so the world of dentistry and the competitiveness has significantly changed, and it's time to get out of that ingrained, like you just open and you'll be fine. And now we need to think more ahead and start getting people to notice our practice, and not just expect that having a practice is going to allow us to have the success that you used to be able to have. And it hasn't been that way for a long time, let's be honest. But
things have changed. Things have changed a lot.
Yeah.
I used to hear a lot that saying, well, back in the day, I used to be able to put my ad in Yellow Pages, or put it out in the newspaper, or open up my clinic, and patients would come. And that's simply just not the way to even get new patients or even continue with your current patients. So things have changed quite a bit. So why don't we talk about why we decided to do this and what brought us together?
Yeah, well, we met at McGill. We were supposed to be doing an event with some other people, and the whole thing fell through. And so we hit it off when we met, and we had really good synergy. And so I thought, why don't we put this together? And you agreed. So that's how we ended up here.
Yeah. So I want to recap. So pretty much we were going to do a workshop for dental practices, specifically about social media marketing, how to get ahead with social media marketing for your dental practice. When everything occurred, it got canceled, this event at McGill University, COVID-19, etc. Fast forward to today, we said, let's put together a live webinar where we can provide some value. Practices have now gone through COVID-19. A lot of practices are opening up or reopening up and are facing different challenges. So what we wanted to do with today's live webinar was answer some questions, pressing ones that we've been receiving from our own clients as to what to do right now, social media, and a lot of other points that we have right now that we're going to be covering. And I think it's good to say, if you do have any questions, you could go ahead and post them, and we'll try and get to your questions at the end of the webinar.
Absolutely. So one of the things we talked about was, even in the past 3 months, like social media has evolved so much because of COVID-19.
Correct.
Pre-COVID, you might not have really paid that much attention to your social media, but it became an amazing medium for getting information. So how did you see that transform for dentists in your group?
So I think that COVID-19 did us a bit of a favor, which was it made it very pertinent to have a social media presence for a dental practice. The reality is that as soon as the COVID-19 was announced as a pandemic, the only medium that dental practices had to reach their patients was online. And so actually some stats show that the usage of Facebook and Instagram increased around March 15, around that week when it was declared a pandemic, about 40% increase in usage of Facebook and Instagram. Even Facebook Lives and Instagram Lives doubled the views. So people were going onto social media to get their news, but also to connect with family and friends that they couldn't see anymore, right? They were using social media as a way to connect and to find pertinent news. And so what I saw from my end was sort of like two phenomenons. One was dental practices that decided to pause social media because they were fearful about what was happening. They didn't want to continue communicating in a very sort of marketing, maybe tone-deaf way. And there were those who did not pause and continued throughout COVID-19. They changed their messaging to become sensitive to what was occurring, though, and continued and are going to continue now with a bit of a different strategy. And there were those also who realized, who had not started social media, that, oh my gosh, I have all of these other dental clinics who are way ahead of me because they've already started. They're able to communicate. They were able to position themselves differently in the market. And I'd like to talk a bit about that, about how some dental practices were able through COVID-19 to really become a thought leader as healthcare professionals. We saw how specialists, especially, were being able to provide good information to their referral practices about PPE or about research that was being done on COVID-19 or infection control. Anything that they would have good information or good sources from, they were able to communicate this to their referring practices. And for GPs, even if they had a small community of followers on Facebook or Instagram or any other social media for that matter, they were also able to position themselves as a thought leader within healthcare by providing the right kind of news to their community. So what I saw pretty much is how the importance of social media was heightened throughout COVID-19. And I think it's just going to continue even more as we go forward. What about you, Angela?
Same thing. And it was interesting to watch things evolve too, because suddenly things got shut down. And so there was all these notices that went up that we're shut down because we're not allowed to practice right now. And then it turned to everyone taking photos of themselves at home or walking their dog. And so I saw it significantly go away from dentistry to very like the fun and personal posts. And then it started to come back as people were like, well, maybe I should actually be using this in a professional way as well. So starting to talk about like what they were doing. And now we're seeing the clinics who are doing well with it are the ones who are starting to educate on what the experience is going to be like coming back to a practice.
Correct.
Yeah. And it was, there was people who, like you said, there was kind of two different scenarios. There was actually the third scenario too, where people were just posting evergreen content that they had planned out months in advance. And so they weren't even acknowledging the situation, but they still had their social media presence going, which felt really weird to observe that, because what was on people's mind was like, why the heck are these dentists shut down? And if you're not communicating that message, then I found a lot of, I talked to a lot of people, and a lot of professionals who weren't in dentistry were saying, I have no idea if I'm allowed to go back to my clinic. I'm not sure if I should be going somewhere else because this dentist over here is putting a lot of information out and mine seems to be ignoring the whole situation. So it's interesting to see how people respond to situations through their social media.
That's right. That's right. I also think that something occurred, which was for those that paused, they sort of gave space to other dentists to grow during COVID-19 because there wasn't that sort of competition going on anymore, right?
Yeah.
So if you did, I think, things right, so not to be tone deaf, and just continue with their evergreen content, I think some dentists actually got ahead during this time, at least in being able to sort of grow their brand.
Yes. And for the ones who were thinking proactively, like even the ones who were starting to buy barriers at the front desk so that they were showing like, it's going to be like walking into 7-Eleven, there's going to be this plastic barrier. Those people, I was watching their comments grow with other dentists going, where did you find that? Because I'm going to need that for my practice too. So there was trendsetters as well that we saw kind of pull ahead because they took advantage of the medium and the ability to actually communicate to the public.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we'll see what's going to happen as I think we're getting into a second phase of reopenings of clinics at different times, which I think is a really good segue to our second question that we wanted to address, which is what content should dental clinics be posting right now on social media?
So I think right now, again, educating on that experience. So what is it going to look like when you walk back into a practice? Because, there's not going to be that many chairs in the waiting room. People are going to be gowned up and looking like they're coming from the Center for Disease Control with hazmat suits. And it's alarming for someone to walk in if they're not expecting to see that. It is going to hit them hard. And like, there's enough anxiety right now about everything to do with aerosolization, even just human interaction. So setting the stage for what people can expect is a good thing. And you don't have to walk through that whole experience in one video. You can do little 15-second snippets. And so on a daily basis, you're increasing the knowledge of what people are going to be expecting from you, while also creating that presence of people wanting to check in and see, okay, if I decide to pull the pin and go in, what is it actually going to be like for me?
Right. I agree with that. So the other thing that you and I were sort of talking about, Angela, was how different clinics are at different phases. And we sort of talked about depending on where you are geographically located, you should be at a different phase in terms of your communication, right? So we talked about how it's really important to start off with making sure that your community understands the safety measures that you've put in place, at least if you're starting to open. So what we've seen is that some clinics have already opened, depending on where you are in North America, a couple of weeks, you've already gone through that. So at the beginning, it's really important, I guess, to be informing patients about those infection control protocols and anything else that you've changed within your practice. So that's sort of like a phase one. However, it's also important to sort of like combine things, right? So that everything does not become just safety measures and protocols, because it becomes very fearful for patients as well.
Absolutely.
So it's kind of heightening that awareness about disease, I guess, or about what's happening right now. And we also talked about how it's good to, yes, combine some of the content and maybe going into a phase two on the kind of content that can be shared. So phase one, maybe like safety measures, infection control protocols, maybe even talk about teledentistry or virtual consultations, which we will get to that in a couple of questions. So if you have set that up, I think it's a great time to start promoting that on social media or start talking about that. And then a phase two, which moves away a bit from infection control and protocols and starts talking about, for example, just the importance of oral health in general and how it's connected to general health. As well as, for example, another idea is financial payment plans. So Angela and I were discussing how right now some patients might be very conscious about their finances, and it's a good idea to start introducing financial payment plans, or to start communicating about them to your following and use social media for that as well. As well as finally just re-educate your patients on elective procedures. So there could be a combination of different content going on right now. Angela, I don't know if you wanted to add a couple of things to that.
For sure. Like when it comes to re-educating them about the importance of oral health, this is something that has significantly, like the message has been skewed significantly because we were told like you can't treat people unless it's an absolute emergency. So people in the back of their mind are like, well, do I actually need that cleaning? Do I actually need that filling? Like how important is this stuff that was so important before COVID and now we're being told can't touch you, we're not allowed to do this stuff. So it is important to actually have that message going out there that yes, it is really important. Unfortunately, the situation is such that to prevent spread of disease, we weren't allowed to be performing those procedures, but it doesn't mean that you don't need to get caught back up on that. And I know, honestly, a lot of my friends were like, I've never flossed so much in my life because I'm terrified that I'm going to have a dental emergency because I'm not going to be able to get seen with the situation that it is. And I'm like, well, this is good. We've made people more aware.
That's funny.
Mm-hmm. So we've got that part of it. Then we also have, as you said, like talking about the elective procedures. I do think that's important as well because, you know, people are getting so inundated with messages about the pandemic and they're fed up. They're kind of sick of it. So if you can allow them to start dreaming, start thinking about what the future could look like, because I'm sure people have been spending a lot of time in the mirror examining what maybe they don't like about their smile because they've got time on their hands. And so they still want to know what those options are so that when things get back to normal, when they have the ability to afford the stuff, they get their job back, they have insurance back, then they know what their options are. And communicating about those, even when people are in the practice and having those new patient consultations, that stuff shouldn't be pushed under the rug. It should still be discussed because it is something that in the future they will be able to access. And if people are actually tuning into your social media, giving them the opportunity to learn about what those potential opportunities are going to be like is an amazing thing.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with that so much. I guess that's a good point to start talking about what not to do on social media. Our favorite topic, I think.
Yep.
What not to do on social media. I'm going to let you start with that.
Oh, good. Thank you. So blood and gore are not what should be on your social media, especially if you're trying to...
Just repeat that again. I think that needs to be repeated.
Blood and gore are a no-no. Retracted smiles like this is a no-no. Like the general public does not want to see that. We like to see it as dentists because we think it's cool, but the general public is pretty turned off by it. You had an experience where you saw something like that with one of your clients. They were sending you content and you were like, no. Let's talk about that.
So one of my clients said they sort of reshifted how they were contacting patients. They were emailing them so that they could come into the clinic. So they said, okay, so as soon as we tell a patient now that they could go into surgery, the first thing that we want to send them is the video of post-op surgery instructions. They said, no patient wants to talk about gauze or blood in their mouth before going into surgery. They don't want that right away before they've even gone into surgery. So that's a big no-no. Mm-hmm. But I guess as a patient, as a person that is not a dentist, that's where you see those kind of, different things that shouldn't be done, let's say.
Yeah. And with social media, they have to put on the hat of the patient and think from the patient's perspective, if that's their audience. Obviously, if they're communicating with other dentists, blood and gore, go nuts. But when you're communicating to the patients, you need to think about how they're going to receive things.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was funny. One day I found this amazing photo when I was commenting on some people's stuff, and it was this retracted smile. So big no-no with like gums and spit everywhere and these braces. And I took a photo of it as a screenshot. And when I was sitting around with my dancers, I sent it to each of them. And I just wanted to see what their reaction would be. And they're like, oh my God, Angela, why did you do that? That's so traumatizing that you sent me this. And I'm like, yep, okay, you just proved my point about what the public likes to see and not like to see.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a good one. I also think that generic content, I think we've all seen the generic content that gets sort of copied from one clinic to the next one,
Mhm.
and just isn't doing it right now. And I think right now is a time to be authentic.
Yes.
Like I was thinking about like what actually I wanted to see. I saw one dentist from his home recording a video talking to his patients in a very authentic, raw way, like zero professional, like zero polished. And I was like, I saw all the comments on this dentist's video. It was amazing.
Mhm.
You know, he was talking about his experience, how he had started cooking and how he had helped his daughter bike, you know, and all the different things that he was doing in the clinic. But he was so sincere, authentic, totally not polished, but amazing video. So I thought, you know, he got all my points for doing the right thing, not going with very generic content, sort of like our team misses you or other sort of posts that don't do anything. They're not going to get a lot of engagement, let's be honest.
Yeah. And the thing is, even if it's your own organic content, it can still be generic. Like I've seen so many photos as you have as well with the "we miss you."
Right.
And to me, that's not heartfelt. What is heartfelt is when you go on and tell your story and you get your team going on and telling their story, and people can actually start really engaging with what you're doing. So you may be doing something similar to everyone else, but that doesn't make it generic as long as it actually shows something more than just a photo that you happen to be able to throw a couple of words over top of. And, you know, what I suggest as part of what your content you should do is start telling your story. Like, if you actually miss your patients, what is it about them that you miss? What is it about being in clinical practice that you miss? Maybe it's the smell of the bond and the latex. I don't know. But whatever juices you up to be excited to be going back to practice, and for the owner as well as for the team, that makes for really interesting content, because a lot of times patients don't even realize why you like doing the job that you're doing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, a lot of people can't even fathom having their fingers doused in spit and blood all day long, right?
Yes.
But it's true.
I agree with that one. Absolutely.
But for those of us who love dentistry, we really get excited about that. And I think being able to show that part of yourself, and sometimes that's considered unprofessional when you're passionate about things, but that gets way more engagement than being really straight-laced and being a talking head with no movement and, you know, not actually letting your guard down and stepping off your pedestal of perfection into the real world and being another human who's connecting with other humans.
Absolutely. So I think that ties it back to being authentic. And right now, more than ever, I think dental practices that are authentic are going to get ahead.
Yep.
And are going to differentiate themselves. I wanted to mention something which was, I think it's a really good moment right now to be maybe using social media as a way to announce any sort of like new processes. What I'm talking about is anything that's important and pertinent to patients. You don't have to announce all your 500 protocol bullet points, you know.
Mhm.
For example, if you set up a process so that patients can fill in COVID-19 online forms, you know, you might want to mention that.
Yeah.
Same thing for medical questionnaires online. Like if this is something new, announce it on social media and use online just marketing in general to be able to set that up for your practice.
Mhm.
So that again, that maybe could be a different sort of message than what the dentist like down the street is portraying on social media. It's how you're getting ahead of the curve and, you know, using all of your sort of like online tools to be able to make for a better patient experience.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think if you can also be paying attention to what's happening in the news and making sure that, you know, if they're making it public that, you know, dentists are open, get on there and mention that you're trying to open. Maybe you can't because you don't have the PPE. Maybe you're going to be delayed by a couple of weeks because you're waiting for a shipment, but you're in the clinic training, getting ready to start the race when you're allowed to. That kind of stuff works really, really well. And just staying current with the times. If there's stuff that's happening that is going to affect the way that you treat your patients, make sure that the patients are aware that you are getting on board with it and not just hiding from the situation.
Absolutely. We have a fourth question that we wanted to talk about, which was teledentistry versus virtual consultations, right?
Yes.
So first we wanted to sort of like define what teledentistry is and what virtual consultations are. Do you want to go ahead, Angela?
No, you had a really good explanation of it, and I think you'll do it more gracefully than I will. So I'm going to let you take that one.
So I think that both teledentistry and virtual consultations are pertinent and they have their time and place. The way that I see it is that teledentistry is actually very current right now because it helps you with the traffic, the in-clinic traffic. So to control that in-clinic traffic by being able to have a one-on-one meeting with a prospective patient, or maybe it's a current patient, where you could do a pre-screening. Now, it's not going to replace a full mouth examination, but I do think it allows for some pre-screening so that when they do come into the clinic, the time that they're in the clinic is reduced. And in some special cases, I think that you're going to be able, if you have x-rays, to diagnose and then go into treatment plan. And then the next time you see them, it's for surgery or for whatever, or to start the treatment. And I'm going to let you maybe like go a bit more into the dental part of that. So I think dental teledentistry, where you do a one-on-one meeting using maybe Zoom or Google Meet, which is paid for, there's a fee for, could be something that is very current and is very pertinent for the time right now versus virtual consultations. And so in the definition, let's say, of a virtual consultation is a bit different. It's free, it's not paid for. It's not a one-on-one consultation. It is a patient who will upload some photos of their smile, that retracted smile photo, and the selfie photo. And I think it works really, really well for orthodontists and cosmetic dentistry procedures. So they'll upload their photos, and then the dentist will follow up with a pre-recorded 2 to 5 minute video explaining what they think they could do to improve your smile and maybe providing some price ranges for treatments, right? So it's not a one-on-one. However, I think virtual consultations are a great way to start building a pipeline of prospective patients. So they're both different in their ways. They both have different usages. And I think they're also both very pertinent for dental practices. So that's my explanation. Do you want to go a bit more in detail as to teledentistry and how it works to be able to diagnose or whatnot?
Well, I have to admit, when someone brought up teledentistry to me a year ago, I was like, how is that ever going to work? Because we need to be in patients' mouths. And we know that COVID-19 has shifted a lot of perspectives on what is possible on a virtual basis. And with the social distancing that we're required to be having, with people afraid to leave their houses, I do think teledentistry is going to become very pertinent over the next year. And it is actually going to save your practice a ton of time because, you can only have so many people in the practice. There's protocols for how you're turning over rooms and whatnot. But if you could be having a conversation with someone and getting to know them, asking really good questions and getting really well prepared for when they actually will arrive at the practice, this is where teledentistry is going to come in really handy. And I think it's going to be very handy as well when we have big treatments that we need to be discussing. We don't necessarily have to have that patient come into our office. It's nice when they can do that, to have that one-on-one face-to-face conversation. But with the times that we're in, people are used to having lots of conversations on Zoom now. And so it's not going to feel like you're abandoning the patient and being lazy and not wanting to actually see them in person. It just is how the times have changed. And I think it's something that's going to continue into the future because it's an amazing thing when you can save patients travel time. They're in their own homes, so there's going to be less anxiety because they're not smelling the dental office and thinking about all the sharp, shiny objects that would potentially come towards their face. And I think it's going to be an amazing tool. And there's like scanning tools, there's scanning apps. I actually have SmileMate coming on next week to talk about their tool, which is like, it's shocking how amazing it is, how effective it is with the scanning. And it picks up things that you wouldn't think that something with a cell phone would actually be able to do. But it's quite remarkable. And, it's going to actually help with people who are in rural areas who don't have as much access. if they don't have to travel in 3 hours and may or may not be able to get the treatment that they need, they can actually have that consultation ahead of time. The dentist can see as much as they can through a scan and see what the patient potentially is dealing with. That's going to help them to triage better as well, whether that patient needs to come to the practice, what potentially will be able to be done. And again, you can be way better prepared for a patient than how we normally do it, which is we're talking on the phone and hoping that they're going to want to come to our practice and the appointment time fits in, and then surprise, they're at our practice and we don't really necessarily know how much we're actually getting into. So yeah, there's some amazing technologies that have come out and are going to be used a lot now because of the situation that we're in.
So Angela, that's a total game changer. Keep me posted about the technology, because right now we've been setting up teledentistry for some of our clients. And I think that would be a huge game changer for them as well.
Yeah.
Being able to scan the smile, I guess, or before they even go on their Zoom or Google Meet meeting with that patient. We have a question from Dipen Patel. He's asking, what tools do you see your clients using that work? Does insurance company pay for the teledentistry?
That one, the insurance is going to have to start getting on board with it. Right now, I know sometimes they are not paying for it, but I still think it's a useful tool, and your patients are going to appreciate the ability to have that access, even if their insurance is not going to cover it. And for right now, everything is about building rapport, paying things forward. If you don't get paid for that teledentistry consultation, is it a big deal? If it builds that rapport moving forward and they end up becoming your patient and being able to come and see you and have those other procedures covered, I think it's worth still doing that for your patients.
Absolutely. So I think that here in Quebec, actually, they were coming up with a code for teledentistry. So I'm not sure which insurance companies are going to cover it or not, but they had they were going to be coming up with it, or they have already. Yes. So that's still in the process, let's say.
Yes, it's being considered across all provinces as well. I just don't know that it's approved just yet with the insurance companies, and we know insurance companies are fun. That's all I'll say.
What tools do you see your clients using that work? I think, to be honest, from our perspective, we've been setting up teledentistry that's customized for our clients. And they've been getting patients, and they've been seeing patients online. So it's been working for them. In terms of tools, I think what Angela talked about, the scanning mechanism on an iPhone, I think that would be amazing game changer, as I said, for teledentistry and virtual consultations in general.
That one is, the discussion on it is happening June 9th. So next Tuesday.
Oh, I'm going to be there for sure.
Yeah, I have the founder and one of the main salespeople coming on for it. So you guys will get to see some really interesting stuff with it. I was blown away when they did the demo with me. So.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Do we have any other questions? So now we've covered the 4 main questions that we really wanted to talk about in this live panel. Does anyone else have any other questions that they might want to pose right now? Or was there anything else, Angela, that you wanted to cover? Did you get any questions yourself? I mean, we've been receiving so many different questions, right? So
someone just wrote virtual admin staff. Absolutely. That's another thing that a lot of dentists have been talking to me about is, do I need to bring my staff, especially my admin team, back into the practice? Or can we have technology at the front where people log themselves in? People are working from home. They're making the recall calls. They're doing the follow-ups with the patients from there. I do absolutely think virtual admins are going to be a big part of how we move forward more efficiently.
I think also that opens up a whole other conversation on how you could use everything online to improve your processes within a dental practice. And again, how some practices that were ahead of the curve, not just in social media, but trying to make sure that everything else was in sync. I'm talking about email marketing. I'm talking about confirming appointments online and with texting and all this stuff. So I think right now it's a great opportunity that all dental practices should look at how online in general or virtual things can help them in their processes.
Yes, absolutely. And right now it's about trying to make things efficient, save costs as much as you can, save as many people from having to come into the practice as possible. So all these tools that we were like, it's never going to work, we're actually realizing that they're going to work quite beautifully. And so if you aren't starting to use these tools in your practice, start reaching out to people like Natalia and myself, because we have lots of tricks up our sleeve as to how you can be leveraging technology to make your practice work right now, not just in the social media space, but also in the virtual space within your practice.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think with that, we could wrap everything up, right?
Absolutely.
So, everyone, as Angela said, you can reach out to either Angela or myself in terms of social media. We both specialize in dental marketing, social media, especially for dental practices. Thank you so much for having me here, Angela.
My pleasure. Do you want to just throw your email in the chat box, and then it'll go up across all the other platforms so people can reach out to you too if they need you?
Of course. So let me put that right in there. I actually think I can put my email in there, but
Here, say it out loud.
So you can reach me at Natalia, NATHALIA, at nataliaporras.com. Or our website, which is npdigitalmarketing.com. I think that's maybe easier.
Perfect. Well, it has been an absolute pleasure sharing time with you, and I'm glad we finally got to do this.
Absolutely. It was about time.
Yes, absolutely. Well, enjoy your evening, and I will speak to you again very soon.
Yes. Thank you so much, Anda.
You're welcome.
Bye.
Bye.